All right. Hello, everyone. My name's Priya, and I'm the Alumni Engagement Manager here at King's. Today's webinar, Navigating the Current Job Market, was designed directly in response to hearing from recent graduates who wanted some extra support in finding a job in the current climate. As a recent graduate, you are entitled to continued support from the King's Careers and Employability team for up to 2 years after you graduate. Today, we are so lucky to be joined by Andrew Wright, who is the Head of Employer Engagement within Careers and Employability. Before I hand over to Andrew, I just want to remind you that there are also lots of resources available to you through the Alumni Office, including past webinars from our How-To series, which focuses on early career development topics, and you can find those on our KCL Alumni YouTube channel. Also, make sure you check out King's Connect to network with alumni in your chosen field and find a mentor, as well as to access exclusive groups with loads of discounts and benefits, including a job board with live vacancies. Just one last quick note from me. Please do submit questions as they come to you and upvote any that you really want us to focus on. There will be at least 2 Q&A breaks during the webinar when we'll try and get to as many questions as we can. Now, without further ado, over to you, Andrew.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Priya. I'm going to try and share my screen with you all now. So let's hope this works. Here, I can't seem to get the screen shared. Is that me or is that the permissions?
I think I've made you host, so hopefully.
Okay, it's not coming up at the minute. The trials and tribulations of digital technology, everyone. We'll get there. We will get there. Perfect. Okay, now that's coming up.
You got it. Okay, perfect.
Fantastic. I'm hoping that's coming up. Priya, can you give me a thumbs up or something if that's working? Fantastic. Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. As Priya said, my name's Andrew Wright. I'm Head of Employer Engagement here at King's Careers and Employability. And for the next 45 minutes or so, I'm going to take you through some of the data, some insights, and hopefully some tips about navigating the current job market. So as Priya said, we know that these are really difficult times for many of our recent graduates. These are not the expectations you probably had when you started your studies at King's, entering into a job market as we are now. But we are here all the way through for the next 2 years for you that have graduated this summer. And you can find more information on that web link there as well on some of the services that you've still got access to. I thought I'd start first and foremost with just some overarching statistics to remind you, of course, that as a graduate of King's, you are in a fantastic position. We know that these are tough times, and I'll walk you through some of the data and some of those insights in a second. But some recent data from our recent graduate outcome survey that you will all be asked in about 15 months' time what you're doing. It's a government survey we had to complete. Tells us that around 90% of our graduates from 2017-18 were in employment or further study at that 15-month point. And really importantly to us, 93% were doing something that was meaningful to them. So not just they were in work, but they were doing something that was related to their discipline, related to their interests and their aspirations for their career. So you are standing in good stead. Your King's experience, your King's brand, as it were, will, we hope, still stand up in the job market. And certainly employers are still reflecting all of that to us. But for those of you that might be thinking a little bit like this sign here, if you're a little bit lost, or maybe something has fallen through in the last few months or in a kind of the last few weeks in a graduate contract, don't panic. We know that there are students and graduates who may find themselves having things rescinded, having contracts changed, or maybe thinking, well, hang on a minute, this new opportunities that sit before me that are presenting themselves, and what do I really want to do now? So as you'll probably know, for those of you who use some of our services while you were students, we put everything we do at King's into these 3 different sections. So if you're still exploring ideas, or maybe you're exploring new ideas, you might be in what we call the discover phase. Perhaps you're still thinking about a few things, but you need a bit more information on how to get there. probably you're in focus. And if you know exactly what you want to do, we classify you as someone in the action phase. So everything we do and all the resources we have here for you as students and as graduates as well, think about where you are in that journey. And it doesn't matter where you are. We'd love you to all be in action. And we hope that many of you are in that phase of thinking and applying for roles. But you might also find that other things that say are coming available to you and you find yourself back in focus. That's fine. We're here to support you wherever you might be. So don't think I can only use the careers team if I know precisely what it is I want to do. So I'm hoping that over the next few minutes or so, we're going to take you through some data on the UK economy and specifically on the graduate labour market itself. I'm going to walk you through some of the knowledge and the skills and experiences that employers right now are telling us are really critical for graduates entering the market at this time and how you can stand out. Little look at how some of the different industry sectors are stacking up in the UK and what's changing in terms of the recruitment and assessment for those of you who might be looking at that at the moment. And then at the end, we'll cover a little bit about where you can find relevant resources and bits you might want to follow up on after today. So let's have a look at what the graduate labour market is currently looking like. Now, you're all King's graduates, so I know you're all going to understand what I'm about to show you, but there's a lot of graphs and a lot of data coming up. And as Priya said, I'll take a pause after I've done that. So if there's any immediate questions people have got, or if there's anything that wasn't clear, we can try and clear that up as well before we move forward. So let's have a look at some of the stats and some of the data. Well, we know that this is a really unprecedented crisis. And there's a lot of talk at the moment, as we all see day to day in the news and in the media, about how different businesses and different sectors are adapting or not to some of that. And certainly as we in the UK go into new localized restrictions up and down the country, we'll see different parts of the country adapting in different ways as well. The thing I really want to press on you today is to differentiate between some of that news and media that we all see, which is really difficult. And we know that there's lots of businesses and lots of individuals and perhaps family members and friends struggling at the moment. But to differentiate some of that to the graduate market. The graduate market is a part of that wider economic kind of market, but it's actually doing okay. It's down, but it's not out, as that quote says there at the bottom from a recent study from something called the Institute of Student Employers, who represent a lot of the big businesses across the UK hiring graduates. So make sure that you're not sitting there thinking, well, there's no opportunities for me. Everything's finished. All these, big businesses are not recruiting. They're cutting staff. By and large, they will still be committed to their graduate pipeline. They need that new talent coming through. They need the expertise, the knowledge, the skills that you as recent graduates can bring to their business to help them recover and help them through the next phase. So a lot of organizations have learned quite significant lessons from 2008. 2008, the last big global financial crash, that a lot of big businesses stopped recruiting, and that was the case. That is certainly not the case now. So don't think there's nothing out there. The 1920 graduate market was a relatively stagnant market. So of course, where there are some cuts, and I'm certainly not saying there are no cuts, but where there are some cuts, they are cutting a little bit harder in certain areas. And we know that graduate roles for 2020, so those that started maybe back in September, were down by about 12%. And some of you perhaps on this call today were victims of where you had contracts, as I say, that were in place, and maybe your employer reneged or took that contract away from you. But what we're hearing is that there's going to be a significantly drip-fed recruitment over the next few months. So again, as a student, you might have been used to a lot of the big businesses recruiting very heavily in the autumn. And indeed, they still are, but they will be extending a lot of those deadlines. They will be coming back out again in December, in January, in February with new opportunities. So don't think also that if I miss the boat now, if I'm not prepared in the next few weeks, I'm going to miss it all over again. You won't. There will be a lot more opportunities across the next few months, which is very, very different to what we've seen before. So here's some of those graphs and the data. And I wanted to show you this data from a company called High Flyers, another company who survey lots of big graduate recruiters in the UK, just to demonstrate how the market has shifted over the last decade or so. And you can see But 2010, it jumped right back up after the crash of 2008, 2009. It's kind of roughly gone between 2.5%, 3% most years in terms of growth. It dipped a little bit in 2017 after Brexit and a lot of big businesses being uncertain about their recruitment immediately then. But actually the market's really resilient and it will stand up and it will come back. Okay, so just think about that last decade of growth, and we're expecting and hearing that it's going to continue as well to grow and rebound again. In terms of what that looks like by sector, for some of you, you might be thinking, I really want to go into this, or I had a contract lined up in that and I'm interested in what's happening there. Again, we're seeing quite different pictures now. So this data is from earlier in the year where we were seeing significant growth or significant depressions in certain areas. And I just wanted to pick on 3 or 4 and take you through what's happening in those areas now. So consulting, we know, is a really big sector of interest for many of our graduates and students at King's. It's growing about 33%, the highest growth it's had in about a decade, back in February, March of this year. Now, what's happened over the last few months is a lot of businesses have been focusing on their core operations, their core business, making decisions about furlough or redundancies. They haven't had quite the same capital and quite the same need for all of those advisory services. So we've seen that fall quite significantly. And for many of you maybe thinking about consulting, you might be seeing some of that reality now as those roles, not necessarily disappearing, but certainly not the same growth we were seeing back in January. Retailing as well, growing around 20%. And I think very obviously we'll all appreciate that that has really, really struggled and is actually now in negative growth, or depressed growth, I should say. Chemicals and pharmaceuticals only growing about 1.7% back in March of this year. Now that is now the biggest industry in the graduate recruitment sector at the moment. So if you are thinking about where the new roles are going to be, this is a really fantastic sector to be looking at. And you don't need to have studied something related to chemicals or pharmaceuticals. These companies need HR, they need business development, they need IT specialists, they need people doing PR and media. And all of those roles will be out there currently and in the coming weeks. And finally, media as well, which was having a bit of a dip back earlier in the year. Again, really struggled between lockdown, where we couldn't film anything, where a lot of production had to be curtailed, but actually big growth at the moment as well in things like buying different content, in gaining content from other places, because if you can't produce content, you need stuff to fill the airwaves, so you buy it in from elsewhere. And there's a whole new range of roles and opportunities that you will find in those sorts of sectors. So this graph here is just a little bit more depth on what's been happening over the last few months by sector. And again, it's really important to differentiate between graduate employment and what might be classified as student employment, for those of you who are now, of course, graduates. So student employment is everything that you might have done whilst you were studying, so insight weeks and internships and placements and things like that. Graduate employment is obviously your first role into the market. And what you can see, hopefully, in this graph here, or this table here, is actually, by and large, graduate recruitment has held up, as I said, really well, apart from the built environment. So if you were going into real estate or construction where there was a big, big dip, actually it's doing okay. Where most of the cuts have been in this sort of area have been either in internships or placements or in non-graduate recruitment, so school leavers, apprenticeships. And significant falls in 1 or 2 sectors are really pulling that mean down. So again, just a lesson on the statistics, have an understanding of what's really going on. And I'd encourage you to sort of really dive deep and understand the causes of some of the data that you might be seeing in front of you. It may not be as obvious as it first appears. And of course, as King's graduates, I know you'll all want to interrogate that data and really understand it. Also, of course, we're seeing some differences regionally. And this was going on before the COVID crisis happened and lockdown in the spring. But again, in terms of thinking about navigating the job market now, one of the best things I can tell you to do is to start thinking more broadly in terms of where your roles and opportunities may lie. Now, the UK is almost a quite unique graduate labour market because 47% of all graduate jobs in the UK are in London. Now, you probably all know that, and that's probably quite obvious to you, but it's actually very unique when you think about other big global economies. It's not the same in America. It's not the same in France or Germany or China or even India and other parts of the world as well, where it's far more spread out between a range of different cities. So the UK has this hold over London, which a lot of big recruiters are now trying to move against, actually, and expand their operations into different parts of the country and different regions as well. So think about what that means for where your roles might now be. Think about looking outside of London. And some of you, of course, will be back in your own parts of the country, perhaps with family or friends as well, and looking to apply to roles on your doorstep. And if you're in Scotland or in the Northeast or in the Northwest, those are really growing areas for graduate recruitment at the moment. And we're seeing this shift as well in how employers are engaging with us here at King's. Lots of opportunities that may have historically only been promoted really to graduates at universities in that region are now being promoted much more on a kind of national scale. And of course, you don't necessarily need to be working for a firm in the location where that firm is based. We're all finding, I'm sat here at home today, there's a lovely picture of Bush House behind me, but I promise you I'm not there. We can all work in all these different ways now. So think about the fact that actually you can be applying for roles in Cornwall or in Scotland or in Wales, and it may be that actually you never need to be in that office. So there's a far broader range of opportunities that might be available to you in navigating this market. So I covered some of the data over the last few months, but what I wanted to do as well is just kind of give you an update of what we're seeing precisely now in October 2020. We know different global markets are reacting very differently. We're seeing China rebound quite quickly. Obviously, the UK and America and parts of Western Europe are really struggling with different lockdown sort of policies as well. So we've got this two-track or K-shaped recovery, as a lot of American economists are calling it at the moment, that is underway. It's a really difficult market still for any of you who are setting up your own business or are self-employed, because a lot of the policies around that and in terms of how you're actually going to find yourself remunerated or support from governments. We know that starting salaries for graduate roles are declining, so don't necessarily have the same expectations of the salaries that your peers a couple of years ahead of you may have had, but it's a trade-off. You cut salaries, but you protect the number of roles that are available. And what, again, employers are telling us is that this is very much an immediate sort of crisis moment where they're cutting salaries very much with the intention to put them back up again quite quickly. So don't think you're going to sit there with a depressed salary for years and years and years. It will go back up once things settle. And decisions made by, the big boards and advisory and shareholders of big companies are going to have a 2 to 3 year impact. So I said that the market's resilient. I said it will continue to grow. But in terms of the decisions around where they're targeting, what offices are growing, what assessment processes they're working with, those are going to stick around. This isn't just a sort of crisis response now. I mentioned that employers not recruiting usually in the spring will be next year in January, February 2021. So if you're thinking about a lot of the big kind of banks and consultancies, a lot of the big fast moving consumer goods organizations as well, they will be coming to King's. They will be recruiting from us in January. And we've got a whole suite of activities that we're running in spring 2021 for students and also you guys as recent graduates that actually we've never usually run, and we're deliberately running that because we can see the market changing. Many EMEA employers, and EMEA is a term that means Europe, Middle East and Africa, and it's how a lot of big businesses separate out their global graduate recruitments, are running their own activity. So we've got this mixed economy, which means that a lot of the opportunities and a lot of the engagements employers would have done historically just for current students, because you had to be at that university at that time, are actually open to the whole world. They're open to you as recent graduates. They're available on their websites. And again, that's a real big difference and a real new opportunity for you to explore different events and activities that you wouldn't have usually found available to you, even as recent graduates. Consider different roles that might be more prominent. We talked about media and the differences in types of roles there. Think about different sectors that you might want to go into, but also different roles. And just a bit of reassurance, just in October and November already, we are seeing over 150 different employers engage with us, virtually, of course, but at our focus festivals and activities here at King's. So employers are still very much coming to us, talking to us and engaging with us directly. Now, there's a lot of information on these two final slides in this section, and hopefully you can have a look back at the recording and look at this in a bit more detail, but conscious again that some of you will be thinking, I really want to go into that particular sector. What's going on? I thought I'd just summarize some of the main themes as well. So business and finance, still recruiting at relatively similar numbers in a lot of areas, less so in consultancy and advisory, as we talked about, and also less so in front office investment banking. And that's probably not so much to do with the COVID pandemic, but actually still as much to do with the uncertainties over Brexit, that of course we've still got around the corner in a few months' time for a lot of that financial services industry. Big focus on non-London roles. So JP Morgan's got a huge office in Bournemouth. A lot of the big banks like Morgan Stanley are opening or expanding offices in Glasgow and Newcastle. So that's that regionality we talked about. And they will be doing a lot of top-up hiring in spring 2021. Technology, of course, doing really, really well out of this. A lot of energy and utilities firms heavily recruiting at the moment, particularly into green tech and sustainability. Law always does well in a crisis. Everyone always needs a lawyer. Everyone always needs an accountant as well if something's going wrong. But there's lots of change ahead in terms of the ability to travel, that transitions of workplace culture in some of the multilateral space. So the likes of the UN and the European Union and NATO and those types of organizations, where it's very prominent that you'll be traveling around the world and engaging with different people, of course, happening very, very differently at the moment. Health and pharmaceuticals, we've talked about, we're seeing a real growth in that area, of course, but against particular roles as well. So PR, media, business development, public engagement, whole range of different things appearing there. And then the two final sort of clusters, probably those that are being hit the most. So the public sector is holding up relatively well, particularly in the UK. We know that there are commitments from the government still on things like policing and defence and teaching, so those numbers are still coming through. But the charity and third sector, of course, is still struggling, and we're expecting really not to see graduate recruitment into that sector recover until about January, February of next year. So if you're thinking, where do you want to go into kind of charity sector or the public sector, you may be waiting a little bit longer than some of the more corporate sectors for that to recover. And diversified sectors, which is a term we use at King's to classify things like retail and advertising and PR and marketing. Again, really, really hard hit, particularly in the UK service economy, and the creative industries in particular, probably at the moment, the most hit sector. So if you are thinking about the creative industries as a route for you, that is going to be really, really tricky at this time. But it's not to say there's no opportunities there at all. We are seeing little shoots of green recovery there as well in certain areas. Right, lots of information, lots of graphs, statistics, tables. So I'm going to pause for a minute, and I'm hoping we've had a few questions in that I can maybe respond to.
I think you gave so much information, they're probably still processing. So we haven't had any questions in just yet, but it might be that people are just typing away right now. While we're waiting for them to come in, I'll ask one that we submitted by email, which was about, and you kind of touched on this with the stats and kind of unpacking them, but a lot of the narrative in the media is about how there are just so many people applying to every role that becomes available, and especially with people having been made redundant, sometimes they're applying for entry-level jobs when maybe they have more experience than, say, some graduates. What can graduates do to stand out in their applications?
So there's a few specific skills and attributes that employers are really, really looking for. And I'll come on actually to talk about some of those things just in a sec. But I think it's about reflecting hard on understanding precisely what the job description is after, precisely what those skills that employers tell us they're lacking. And again, I'll cover some of those in a second. And structuring your applications really, really clearly. We are doing a little bit of recruitment at King's at the moment, and I was fortunate to see some applications the other day. We had about 100 and something applications for one job, which is far more than even I would usually see for a role at King's. I think is representative, of course, of the market at large. Last year, on average, most big graduate schemes were seeing about 60 to 70 applications per vacancy. This year, we're already seeing it's around 120, 130, so it's doubled. But what's going to help you to stand out, even amongst those people who perhaps have got more advanced experience, whatever, is even as basic as structuring your application as clearly as possible for the recruiter to be able to quickly pull out and identify the right themes. Because when you're dealing with so much volume, you need to be able to quickly identify what's there in front of you.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I definitely appreciate a well-structured, clear application when I'm looking through them. We have a few questions that have now been submitted. The first one is, what would you say that is the direction of the current job market in terms of new emerging and upcoming roles that are novel to our current times?
Ooh, new emerging upcoming roles, novel to the current times. I'm not sure I'd say they're novel to the current times, but we're seeing a lot of growth in job roles around things like regulation, cybersecurity, internet technologies, cloud-based software. Those sorts of roles are growing exponentially at the moment. And I think, again, that's a combination of this shift to digital that we've all had to do, but also in shifting to digital, you suddenly unlock so many questions around security and compliance and regulation across different markets around the world, because you can be recruiting and broadcasting to different networks and different markets. And as well, it's still that Brexit question that's hanging over us, which is, you know, with so many changes in legislation things, you need to be really confident in your regulatory frameworks, in different banking processes, in different legal processes, in different retail processes as well, and tax regimes. So those sorts of roles are really clearly coming through. And the other sector is still a sort of second renewed growth of areas like green tech and sustainability. And I think as well, a lot of businesses are coming through this crisis and thinking about how they do business in a different way. They're realizing they don't have to do it in the same physical ways and with the same sort of packaging and the same outputs and things. So they're trying very clearly to identify different ways of doing that. And that's coming really clearly through as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. We've got another question about what would be the recommended approach currently. I think they mean in terms of trying to find what's available, contacting companies directly for available positions, looking at jobs online, contacting a headhunter, or something else.
I'm going to come on to talk about that in a second.
Okay, perfect.
Do that question.
And then the other upvoted question is, I recently finished my PhD in physics and did some coding. My goal is to get a data scientist position in industry. I find the transition between academia and industry pretty tricky because of the lack of professional experience. Do you have any tips or advice, I guess, to make that transition from an academic based experience into industry?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. One really good I would encourage you or that person to think about is there's been a huge growth in what we call virtual work simulation over the last few months. So a lot of businesses have used this as a replacement for some of the internships and insight programs they would usually run. But actually they've kind of done it so that it's open to any applicants. You don't need to go through a process. They've got all sorts of things online, and you can actually go and do a sort of 3 to 4 week work simulation for free. It's not a whole kind of 4 weeks, but you do it a couple of hours a day, and you'll get to understand the nature of different businesses. So King's has got a subscription to an organization called The Forage, and they've got a whole range of different online virtual work simulations that if you've never got kind of commercial experience, or you're worried about making that leap from academia into a different type of role, might be a really, really good thing to think about. And the second thing is I would always encourage students, whether you're undergraduates, postgraduates, or certainly a PhD, to come and have an appointment with us. We've got a fantastic set of colleagues in the Careers and Employability team, specifically for our researchers and research staff, and I know they'd be delighted to have a conversation with whoever that individual is to help them in their own career journey.
Perfect. And I think just one last one before we head into the next section is from Hannah. She's asking, is it more damaging to your long-term career ambitions to go for a job role that's less relevant to your career path, or to have a larger gap in your job history?
It's a great question. It's partly dependent on your circumstances. Some students or some graduates may, of course, be able to take that gap. Some will not. I think most employers, and My personal advice would always be you're better off in a job and in a role, gaining experience and gaining employability skills, even if it's not the right role that you desperately want to go into. I think no one really ends up straight away with the role that they think is their dream role. It's just not the way the world works, unfortunately. So give yourself an opportunity to try something, build the skills along the way. And you never know that by going into an industry or going into a role that you think, yeah, this isn't the one for me, you never know where it's going to take you. You never know what networks that's going to open and also what opportunities may arise in that. I certainly didn't know what I wanted to do when I left university, and I ended up going into this sector. And 10 years later, I'm still doing it, doing different roles, and have learned different things along the way. So absolutely, I'd say my advice personally would be take a role, take any role, maximize the usage of it, and think about how it's going to add value to future employers when you want to make, or when you're able to make that transition. But, for some of you, it might be a really great opportunity to take a break, to reflect and think about what is it that I really want to do? Who am I as an individual? What is this opportunity and this sort of new economy going to mean for what I want to do?
Perfect. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I'm definitely not doing what I expected to do. And the jobs I've had along the way, I've learned things that have all contributed to how I am able to perform in this role now. So sometimes going off course a little bit actually will help you get back on course, because you'll have experience that other candidates won't.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Right, I will crack on, and I think there'll be some time hopefully as well at the end for some more questions. So we're just sort of talking about this aspect actually, which is what we mean by careers and employability. And I think sometimes that distinction is misunderstood by a lot of students and graduates even at King's. So hopefully this slide makes it a little bit clearer. Your career is, of course, hopefully what you're about to embark on. It's the choices you make and those roles and opportunities and sectors that you will go through as a kind of linear process in life. The employability is everything you gain along the way. So that's what we were just talking about in terms of those networks, that knowledge, those different skills and experiences. And you will take that with you wherever you go. And it's really, really important, those employability skills. At King's, we talk very much about something called CASE, K-A-S-E, your knowledge, attributes, skills, and experiences. And one of the things I'm going to encourage you to do, not right now, but maybe over the next few days, is to actually map out what that might mean to you. So you can start thinking about your different sets of knowledge, where you get that from. Is it from your discipline or your course? Is it from your hobbies and interests? What kinds of skills do you possess, and where the gaps are in some of that, and how you can then go forward and build on some of those things. So your career is a little bit like the kind of journey and the different sorts of destinations you get to in life. And the employability is the luggage you take along the way, if we can put it like that. In terms of what it is employers are looking for, these are some of the things that we asked and surveyed some of our big employers at King's just in the last few weeks. And I've also, on the right-hand side, you can see a bit of data. It's quite small deliberately, because it's sort of important but not critical. Again, from the Institute of Student Employers, on the top sets of skills that they are desperately seeking in new graduates. And many of those will not be a surprise to you. But I think more important is these things that are coming clearer through from employers right now. They are desperately looking for that commercial awareness. They need to know more than ever right now that you as a recent graduate understand what makes them distinctive. It's what makes that role in their organization distinctive, and why they're different to some of their competitors. So it's that thinking about, if you're applying to a role in a law firm or in a retail organization, and you write an application and you could copy and paste it and replace the name of that organization with someone else and it still makes sense, it's not distinctive enough. That's really, really critical, we're hearing from employers at the moment. They're of course looking for relevant work experience, but I really wanted to reiterate, and we're hearing this from employers directly, it doesn't need to be in the sector. It doesn't need to be in that role. It doesn't need to have been paid. It could be part-time. It could be voluntary. It could be virtual. All of those are equally valid. So do not forget about all the voluntary experience you've done during your times at King's or elsewhere as well, whether that was part of a student society or a sports club, or volunteering in your local community, or any part-time jobs you've had as well. Whether it's been working in a shop, working behind a bar, or doing something in an office environment. All incredibly, incredibly valuable experience. They're looking for resilience. These times are really difficult times, and they need to be able to have new recruits joining their businesses that can demonstrate that resilience. They're looking for agility and flexibility, and we're seeing that go quite quickly up and up and up through that graph there on the right-hand side of what it is that recruiters are looking for now. They are acknowledging the challenges of recent assessment. And again, I think many of you will have obviously gone through examinations and written dissertations recently as well. And that may not have gone quite the way you wanted. There may have been other circumstances, and of course, the difficulty of the times that perhaps impacted on some of the results you got. Employers understand that, and we're hearing that very clearly at the moment, that whilst they want that kind of progression of long-term, really good set of outcomes, they do understand that particularly this year of all years, you know, there may have been challenges, there may have been blips in the system. And many, many of them are actively encouraging them. And indeed, we're passing on this message to encourage you too, to put that down in your applications, you know, to put down any mitigating circumstances. And they are seeing those very clearly and not sort of rejecting you just because you didn't meet a set of criteria, you didn't quite meet the threshold that they're looking for. Extracurricular experience has always been critical and is ever more so still in this economy. So don't sort of shy away from putting your hobbies and interests and things as part of your application. Digital skills are becoming more and more important. I think that's an obvious thing. Transferable skills, so all those things that we know about in terms of teamwork and presentation, building, etc. Again, really, really key. And actually, this is a real distinction once more in the UK market, that most employers are more looking at those transferable skills than they are actually looking at what it is you studied. So of course they're interested in the discipline you did and the passion and everything you can bring from that disciplinary knowledge, but you know that you don't have to have studied law to be a lawyer. You know that you don't have to have studied accountancy to be an accountant. So it's those transferable skills and these digital skills and everything else that's going to make you stand out. Of course, they're still looking for a prestigious university, and hopefully your time at King's will still give you that. There are still very many employers, as I said, that are recruiting and engaging with us day to day. And they're asking this question: what is it that you did during the COVID summer? So what did you do over the last few months? Now, for many of you, of course, that will be, well, I was doing my exams, I was writing my dissertation. That's great. But what else were you doing? Was there something you were doing in your local community? Did you have caring responsibilities that either added or maybe was part of that sort of mitigating circumstances for some of your other things? Make that really clear. They really want to hear what it is that you did this summer and understand how you've used that time, either in terms of your development or in supporting others in your communities as well. So as I said, think about how all of those things might come together. Your knowledge that maybe from your course or from your personal kind of experiences and interests, those attributes, what make us who we are, how we work and how we engage, and those skills and experiences, map those out and have a think about what it is that you can add value to an employer in the UK, and how you as a recent graduate with that experience of being in study quite recently can add value perhaps over and above someone who's got some experience but doesn't have quite as close experience to some of the disciplinary knowledge and new exciting research that's been going on in your field of study over the last few years as well. So let's just have a little think about routes into the market. And of course, it's not all about graduate schemes. The UK market is pretty much split into these three different areas. There of course are graduate schemes, there's what we call direct entry roles, and then really importantly at the moment is something called the hidden job market. Now, you've probably all heard these terms before, but I'm just going to go through what these really, really mean. So the graduate schemes are those with large multinational companies. They're often sort of training schemes supported by professional development. And they're the types of organizations that you will find engaging with the likes of King's and other big universities and coming to events on campus. They've got big budgets, they're hiring in big numbers, and they need their brand awareness out there. So banking, finance, law, energy, technology are those kind of areas. And they're recruiting, as I say, now, but they're also going to be recruiting into the spring as well. And just to give you an impression again of how the market is still holding up, these are the intakes from some of the big employers that they're telling us they're going to be recruiting in the next few months. So Teach First, the biggest graduate recruiter in the UK, recruiting around 1,800 new graduates this year. but some other big names there as well. So you can see there are still opportunities out there. Direct entry roles are actually 90% of where all graduate opportunities are in the UK. And I think a lot of recent graduates and students often overlook some of this because you see all those big brand names and those big schemes. Don't forget everything else that is out there available to you, whether it's with a small and medium-sized business or even with a larger business. They've all got fantastic opportunities, but the recruitment will only occur when a vacancy arises. And again, just some ideas of some of the direct entry intakes this year. So they're not part of a big scheme, they're not going to be recruiting en masse, but still recruiting sort of sizable numbers into publishing houses, charities, Groupeng, who are a big sort of media agency doing the planning behind a lot of marketing campaigns for big businesses. Again, lots out there. But really critically is this thing we call the hidden job market. And I think it's represented by this sort of iceberg image here. All those things I've just talked about is everything on top of the surface. And the one thing I would encourage you as graduates to be doing at the moment is looking at making speculative applications, looking at approaching different employers, approaching networks, approaching family and friends and peers, and indeed your fellow graduates, whether that's through the King's Alumni Relations team and the community or through your own sort of networks you've got as well. Putting yourself in the best position and making it apparent that you're looking for roles in that area. You might even find yourself, as I say, making speculative applications, sending a CV in. It might result in something immediately. They might hold that application on file for you in a few months' time as their business becomes clearer how it's going to evolve from this crisis. And you know what? It's far cheaper for them to be able to go back to that stack of applications on the desk and ring you up and go, actually, we've now got a role, than it is for them to go out and do lots of mass marketing and recruitment. So there's lots more information on all of this on some of the resources we've got here at King's, but please do think about those three distinctive different areas and don't just focus on the big graduate schemes. In terms of recruitment deadlines, there are some adjustments this year. So again, on the left-hand side, you'll see when the recruitment deadlines are usually for these big sectors. In the middle is where we're seeing a bit more of an adjustment. And sometimes that's giving you a bit more time. And in some sectors, it's actually moving forward a little bit. So investment banking, a bit more time, consultancy, professional services, a bit more time. Public sector, rolling is this sense that things will come up as they will always come up. But actually, because it's recovering, we're probably not going to see all of that till November. And just three more again here, technology and industrials, a little bit more time. Health and pharmaceuticals are coming out earlier because they've got much more roles to fill. And actually a lot of deadlines for those big businesses are happening right now. So that's the one sector that if you are thinking, okay, there's lots of opportunity there, I want to get into it, actually now is the time to be applying for those types of roles. And in terms of the changing assessment, well, all these things are probably things you're familiar with. We're seeing video interviewing, of course, replacing a lot of the face-to-face, e-tray exercises where you'll be asked to do sort of simulations of how you sort an inbox or how you deal with responses to queries. And we've really tried hard at King's to give students and graduates access to demos and simulations of a lot of these opportunities. Again, you'll find these on our web pages and in our support, and I'll come on, I'll show you where that is very, very shortly. But don't think, I have no idea how to do a video interview, or I've got no idea what a virtual assessment centre looks like. We've got loads of support to help you, because these are going to stick now. These are not going away in the market. So just to close, sort of finding opportunities and accessing our support. The first place I'd encourage all of you to go is to our King's Career Connect portal. Now, you are probably familiar with this as a student. You can still have access to this for up to 2 years out, as Priya said, as recent graduates. So I'd encourage you, if you've not already, to go and update your profile or log an alumni profile on there. Set your profile up so you'll receive targeted messages still from us in areas that you want to hear from, etc. And of course, you can still book appointments and access our events calendar on all the other services through that as well. And there are over 500 graduate jobs online today and growing. So there are still lots of opportunities there also. But of course, have a look at other websites. I mentioned that employers are doing a lot of their own activity this year. So you'll find a lot more on their websites. There's lots of specialist graduate job sites as well that you've probably come across. And for different sectors, if you're interested in going into different areas, again, have a think about those particular websites that are still recruiting graduates as well, or advertising roles for graduates. And don't forget things like online conferences and events, which are a great opportunity right now to build those networks and as recent graduates to get your name and your face in front of some of these really, really prominent speakers and really prominent business people making decisions about recruitment. Just some key dates for the next few months. What we've done this year at King's is moved all of our big careers fairs and activities into something we're calling focused festivals. Now, these are week-long events or 2-week-long events, all held virtually over the next few weeks and months. So this week, right now, we're hosting both our Life and Health Sciences event and focus on technology and data. For the next 2 weeks, we've got law, then government public sector policy, another festival on health, pharma and bioscience. And then in spring of next year, we're going to be repeating, as I said, some of the work we've already done earlier this term on banking, finance and consultancy, and then ending with a graduate jobs festival in February. So again, if you are still thinking, sitting there now, do you know what, I'm not quite ready yet, but maybe I want to be looking at my graduate job again in the spring, have a think about those festivals as alumni and how we can help you. And some resources, again, I'm not going to show this too long because hopefully when you come back and maybe watch the recording, you'll be able to look at these, but there's lots of resources and FAQs out there that I'd encourage you to have a look at as well. So in terms of next steps, as I said, make sure you've registered or updated your King's Career Connect alumni account to receive regular mailings, look at upcoming events, review your CV through our new CV checker tool that you can do all online, or of course, continue to book an appointment with some of our careers consultants and advisors. And you can access all of our digital careers education on Keats. And as alumni, you're probably sitting there thinking, I don't have access to Keats anymore, but you do, certainly for our section at least, and you'll find the password for all of our website and web content and resources and information and videos and recordings of other events we've done on Keats through your King's Career Connect account. So you need to activate that account or update that account as a graduate, and you'll find a password on that dashboard that will take you into our Keats pages, where again, you can still access all of that information. Okay, that's it from me. I don't know if we've got any more questions, but if we do, I hope we've got a few more minutes to answer some of those now as well.
Yeah, I think we have some time just to get to a few. Just before I get into the questions, also just as Andrew was saying, you know, your networks are a fantastic resource for you, and especially alumni. They are so thrilled to be able to help recent graduate students at King's. There is a connection that you will forever have with each other. So do also, if you haven't registered already for King's Connect, register for that. I know it's got a similar name to King's Careers Connect. It is a different place, and there's lots of resources. I mentioned discounts and benefits, the live jobs board with vacancies, and all kinds of other wonderful things, including mentoring programs and stuff. So you can find alumni who are already in the field that you're interested in getting into, and maybe sneak into that hidden job market that way. Absolutely. Right. So the top upvoted question is, how can I start a career using a social sciences degree?
How do I start a career using a social sciences degree? Well, social sciences covers a whole range of different degree disciplines. So that's a tricky question to answer, because actually it doesn't matter what you studied. It's about what you're interested in and what you can take from that degree to apply to a particular employer. As I said, most employers actually don't really put much interest in what you've studied. It's about what transferable skills, what other experiences, what other kind of activities and interests you have and what you can bring to their business. So think about, actually, even if you have a degree in something like geography or philosophy or history or one of those programs that you think, well, that doesn't lend itself particularly vocationally to a particular sector, that's fine. Try and extract some of the skills that you've learned from things like presentations and teamwork and group work and research and data analysis from those studies, and you can apply those to a whole range of different sectors and roles as well. If you've still got questions or queries or concerns, though, absolutely come and book an appointment with us, and we'll walk you through some ideas of that, because it's a really common question that we get asked, which is, you know, I don't know really where this discipline or this degree takes me. We can help you to unlock some of that and work out where to find your kind of career journey.
Perfect. The next question is, aside from LinkedIn, where would you say is the best place to find these direct entry graduate roles?
So often it is on their own website. or by signing up to mailing lists and newsletters for the jobs portals of a lot of these organizations. LinkedIn is a great place though. Depending on the sector, there's some other platforms that are often really great. In fact, we're finding a lot more roles in things like creative industries being promoted on places like Instagram, which I have to admit has gone straight over my head as someone who doesn't have an Instagram account. But actually that's becoming a recruitment platform now. So think about actually your social media networks that you might have. And you might want to think about those in a slightly different way now, because apparently they're not just your kind of personal life, but they're actually where recruiters are now actively recruiting. And I say that not to kind of getting you in a sense that they're looking at what you're doing and checking up on you, but actually they are becoming a recruitment platform as much as they are a social network as well. So think about those different things.
Yeah, that's really good to know. I didn't know about that on Instagram either. And then we've got, Rebecca said, following on from Hannah's question, is it better to try and get a part-time job in, for example, a pub or a shop whilst applying for full-time jobs in your area? Or is it better to spend all your time applying?
Again, I'd always reiterate a job is better than no job personally. You will be gaining great skills from a part-time job in retail or a pub. And actually, you know what? When I see applications from any candidates for a role, whether it's a role here at King's or a role that I've been asked to help shortlist for an employer or something externally, candidates who can demonstrate the skills they've gained through part-time or voluntary things, whether it's in a bar or working in a fast food restaurant or a pub or whatever, you gain fantastic people skills, fantastic time management skills, fantastic resilience dealing with difficult customers in some of those settings that are really appealing to employers. So think about not just kind of, okay, this is going to tide me over, it's a great role, I need the money, but also actually I'm gaining really good skills from this. Dealing with conflict and dealing with difficult customers is something that is a really strongly valued skill by a lot of employers. And if you can draw that out in your applications, you're probably going to stand yourself better off than, just sort of staying out of a job and thinking about applying.
Absolutely. It's all about how you sell the skills that you're gaining. I mean,
absolutely.
Who worked in a pub, I know that it takes a lot of resilience. So if I see that on someone's application, I will, that's not something I would ever hold against somebody.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I love seeing those types of things on a CV or an application.
Definitely. I think we've got time for one last one. This is one that kind of touched on a bit in the first section, but in terms of the recommended approach for trying to find jobs and apply to them, would you say contacting companies directly for available positions is better than looking online or going through a headhunter? Is that the best way, or is there something else people should be doing?
So there's sort of three different things there. There's, should I be applying directly online? Should I be just submitting things speculatively and sort of writing them anyway? Or should I be using recruiters and headhunters? All three, I think, are applicable right now. I think it's going to be a combination, and it will depend again on the sector that you want to go into. Certain sectors might lend themselves, like the creative industries and creative arts and media, to more direct approaches and to using quite specialist headhunters or recruitment agencies. Others will be far more open and transparent about the roles on their websites. But I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's going to be a combination of all of those things, really, if you're set on a particular role in a particular sector.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, we haven't had a chance to get to all of the questions, but definitely make an appointment with the Careers and Employability team, or if you have burning questions, you're welcome to contact the alumni office at forever@kcl.ac.uk or Careers and Employability, I'm sure similarly. I'd just like to close this up by saying a huge thank you to Andrew for taking the time to share his insights with us today. And like I said, just get in touch with Careers and Employability and or the alumni office with any outstanding questions that you have about anything that was mentioned or even stuff that we didn't get to. Before I leave you, I just wanted to highlight some of the upcoming web events that might be of interest this month. I've popped the links in the chat. So there's numerous Discover careers and events taking place across the rest of the month, run by Careers and Employability. So I've just popped in the list the link for you, and you can see if there's any that are of interest. I think they're happening across November as well. And then in a bit of a different vein, I'm hosting another Students versus Alumni pub quiz on the 22nd of October. So if you want to take your mind off applications and just have some fun, get a team together, and register. It's always a really good time. And then I'm also excited to announce that it's the launch of the first ever King's Global Day of Giving between the 27th and the 29th of October. So the Global Day of Giving is a 48-hour online fundraising event to raise money for two incredibly important areas at King's. One, supporting disadvantaged students, and the other, funding life-saving research. So save the date, follow us on social media using hashtag King's Day of Giving. Should be really fun as well. And you can also join early by signing up as a champion and helping to spread the word. Also, there's loads of other events available to you as King's alumni. So if you want to check out the other events, I've popped in the link to just our general events listing. So once again, a huge thank you to Andrew for joining us today. And thank you all for listening. Take care. If you just click leave when you're ready, Andrew.
That's fine. Just closing the slide deck.